Twin brothers found dead on a Georgia mountain. Their bodies discovered by hikers, both shot and killed at just 19 years old. Authorities say it was a murder-suicide, but their family, they do not believe it. They say the story just doesn't add up and are demanding a deeper investigation. So far, there's been one arrest in the case. I'll walk you through the details. For Law and Crime News, I'm Kennedi Walker. Before we dive into this case, I want to tell you about something exciting at Law and Crime. We are launching a new channel called Scandal that is dedicated to exposing the dark side of fame, covering all the wild crimes in Hollywood, and diving into the disturbing rumors floating around celebrity circles. To stay up to date on all the latest celebrity scandals, click on the link in the description of this video and subscribe to Scandal today. All right, back to the story. A Georgia family is living a nightmare, mourning not one, but two devastating losses. Twin brothers Qaadir and Naazir Lewis were found fatally shot on top of a mountain miles away from their home. Their family told WXIA News the 19-year-olds were supposed to be in Boston visiting friends. Their plane tickets were booked, their bags were packed, and their family thought they were already on the way. But they never made their flight. Instead, just 24 hours later, they were found dead. Their bodies were discovered nearly 90 miles away from their Lawrenceville, Georgia home at the top of Bell Mountain, a place their family says they've never been before. According to Explore Georgia, the park is known for the Hal Herron Scenic Overlook, which rises to over 3,000 feet of elevation and has a 360 view of the surrounding lake and mountains. In an interview with local news station WXIA, the family said the brothers don't hike the mountain. They know nothing about the area, and they, quote, never heard of Bell Mountain, so how did they end up there? According to the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, at 11:05 a.m. on Saturday, March 8th, a 911 call came in. Hikers had stumbled upon the unthinkable. Two young men, both shot. The GBI ruled it a murder-suicide in their preliminary investigation, claiming one of the brothers pulled the trigger before turning the gun on himself. But their family refuses to accept that. They say the twins were inseparable, and the theory doesn't add up. We do know, however, that reportedly their plane tickets to Boston were allegedly still in their wallets. Investigators have not released any details about the gunshots, gun wounds, any weapons found at the scene, or any other details about how they were found and if or what was also on them. It's also unknown who had the last known contact with the twins and if there were any indicators from friends that the two weren't going to be making that trip to Boston. Police and family members have also not released how the two ended up on the mountain, such as driving or being dropped off. We do know that the FBI is assisting the Towns County Sheriff's Office with the investigation. So far, there has been one arrest in the case. Days after the twins' death, the GBI released an update saying they arrested and charged 42-year-old Scott Curlin with misdemeanor obstruction. Curlin is a volunteer firefighter in Towns County who took photos of the Lewis twins' death scene and shared them publicly. In a GoFundMe page created by the brothers' aunt, she wrote, quote, "My nephews wouldn't do this. They came from a family of love, and the twins wanted so much for their future. They had dreams of starting their very own clothing line." Unfortunately, something happened at Bell Mountain that ended the lives of 19-year-old Qaadir and Naazir, which needs to be further investigated. At the time of this recording, the GoFundMe has raised nearly $30,000. So what really happened on that mountain? How did the brothers, who were supposed to be on a flight to Boston, end up dead in a place their family says they've never been? It's a mystery their loved ones are desperate to unravel, and one they hope police will answer soon as they struggle to make sense of this unimaginable loss. And I'm joined by legal expert Lawrence Zimmerman. Lauren, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you.
So let's just dive right in. Based on what we know, which unfortunately is not a lot of information at this point, does the official ruling of murder-suicide align with typical patterns seen in similar cases?
I mean, it's hard to really say because police don't always release all the details. So, it's kind of early, I think. I mean, I guess just if you look back just a couple weeks ago, the whole Gene Hackman thing, right? People thought that was potentially a murder-suicide. Ends up it wasn't at all. So I sometimes I think that's just because they don't really know anything else. That may just be the easiest conclusion to draw right now, and then they'll figure it out. But I don't know.
When investigators make an early ruling like this, how thorough is their process? Could they be potentially overlooking key evidence?
Yeah, of course. And yeah, I'm not trying to insult the Towns County Sheriff's Office, but it's not exactly. It's a pretty safe place, pretty safe county. They don't have many things like this happen up there. I know the area pretty well. Um, so, and they don't have a large law enforcement, sheriff's department, just a couple investigators. I don't think there's, again, I'm not in any way criticizing them at all. I'm just saying I don't think they have the resources typically that you see in a major city or the experience, which is why a lot of people like living there because they don't have a lot of crime.
Well, do you think in situations like this is when they try to tap on other officials to help them with a case such as this one?
Yeah, and I know the GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, typically gets involved, and they did get involved in this. But again, it's still early, so it's hard to say. And unfortunately for us, the police aren't typically don't give out a lot of information, right? Because they want to see if they can get any leads, if there are any tips, and sometimes they actually give out intentionally false information to try to generate a lead.
Well, the twins' family insists that they would not harm each other. How much weight does a family's perspective hold in cases like this?
I mean, you would hope that the family would know their kids better than anybody, obviously, right? I mean, it's pretty scary that this would all of a sudden just happen and there's been no sign at all whatsoever. But I don't know the family, and none of us do, so I don't know what goes on behind closed doors. No, nobody ever knows that. So that may be the face they're putting on for the public. Again, I don't know. They may be 100% the greatest family in the world. So I'm just commenting. So who knows? And unfortunately, maybe for them, maybe the kids were involved in something or had some issues going on they didn't know about. But again, hard to say.
Do you think, just the fact alone that the family is saying, hey, this would never happen is reason enough to reopen the case or to continue investigating? Or is this something that, police deal with all the time with families saying that, hey, this wouldn't happen or that wouldn't happen?
Sure, I mean, I have cases where people get involved in stuff where the families have zero idea. And as a parent of a teenager, it's kind of scary, So we think we know what's going on in our kids' lives, but sometimes you just don't. So it could just be complete shock to them, and it could be true. Who knows? It's very unfortunate, very sad at the end of the day, no matter what.
What kind of evidence would be needed to confirm or refute this murder suicide theory?
I mean, I'd want to be looking for like gunshot residue on at least, obviously, one of the decedent's hands or body. Weapon obviously would be nice with someone's fingerprints if that was found somewhere. I think in a murder suicide, you think they'd find the weapon right there at the location. I'm not sure how, if someone killed himself, how the weapon would disappear, unless someone came along. I mean, who knows? Maybe it was a murder. We don't know if they're supposed to go to Boston and they had tickets. Maybe they ran into somebody that kidnapped them. Maybe they're meeting somebody somewhere and something went sideways. Maybe them going to Boston was a ruse, but something bad happened. I hate to speculate. I mean, I know that's what we do right now, but I'd definitely be looking for a lot of those things, text messages. I was through the police who gotten search warrants and gotten, looked into their messages, their locations, their emails, see what was going on, their call logs. I mean, those are things they would definitely be looking into.
Now, but with the murder suicide theory, I like what you brought up there about, the murder weapon. Wouldn't they have found that, or is that something that just wouldn't get released to the public? Because you would think that if they're saying that this is murder suicide and one of the twins potentially killed the other, then there would be a gun. Or is it just possible that they wouldn't tell the public?
I mean, it's weird, right? Common sense dictates if someone kills himself, they can't get rid of the gun. I'm not laughing at the death. I'm just laughing at
Right, right.
how that even possible. So I don't know the situation or how there's no weapon found if they're claiming it's murder suicide. That's certainly a contradiction. And to answer your question is maybe the police aren't giving out that information. Maybe they're trying to see if that leads to someone coming forward with more information.
If law enforcement rushes to judgment in a case, what legal steps can a family take to push for further investigation?
A lot of times you see public, here we are on a news show right now. The victims' families obviously would, generate a lot of publicity with a case like this, and that could put a lot of pressure on law enforcement to try to look into it more. I mean, I'm not so sure. I'm asking you. I don't know if this was a final conclusion that you've drawn as a murder suicide, but I certainly would think if there's no weapon found, that's contradictory to a murder suicide.
Yeah, this is, preliminary investigation. We're waiting on the autopsies and things like that. But this is what has been released to the public as of this recording so far.
Okay.
Now, if this were a double homicide instead, what would investigators be looking for?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the angle, where the bullet wounds, obviously how they were shot, who else was up there, maybe see if there's any cameras, license plate readers, and it's Bell Mountain and Hiawassee, it's not the area around there is not highly populated. There's not a lot. I don't think there's a lot of surveillance cameras like there are in a major, city like Atlanta. But it's pretty crowded. Anytime I've been in Bell Mountain, it's usually pretty crowded. There's a lot of people. It's a beautiful view overlooking the lake. So like eyewitnesses, certainly.
And we'll touch on, just the specifics of the area in a second. But can an independent autopsy or forensic expert contradict a state ruling? If so, how often does that actually influence law enforcement?
Yeah, it's pretty rare. I mean, that someone gets an independent autopsy. It's pretty expensive. Not everybody does that. I'm not so sure in this kind of situation if it's a gunshot wound. I'm not really sure what an autopsy would rule in or rule out, right? I don't know what they would be looking for because it's an autopsy. It's fairly, not easy for me. I'm not a medical examiner, but I don't think it's a pretty common thing, unfortunately. So I don't know what an independent autopsy would rule out. Again, don't know.
Well, how often do forensic mistakes happen in cases like this, if at all?
Oh, in a gunshot case, and depending on what the ruling is, mistakes happen all the time in the forensic medical exams and forensic sciences, right? But I think in an autopsy with a gunshot wound, it seems just to be sort of a basic autopsy. It's nothing like toxicology, looking for drugs in someone's system, someone overdosed, or if there's a question they overdosed, or if someone killed them, poison. Those are more complex kind of medical exams or disease, right? But a gunshot. We live in the United States of America. Unfortunately, gunshots are pretty everyday, every minute occurrence.
And we touched on this a little bit in the beginning, but how do factors like cell phone records, GPS tracking, or digital evidence come into play in cases where foul play is suspected?
These days, it's everything. Digital evidence could, include you in a crime or exclude you from a crime. So most investigators will look into digital evidence. They'll look at someone's cell phone records, their messages, their emails, their iCloud accounts, the Apple phone or Android, or the Google accounts, everything, like GPS, cell site location information, meaning cell towers. Your phone pings off different towers while you're traveling. They could, depending on what part of the town you're in, there's more towers in a big city. But certainly you ping on towers in near Hiawassee, Bell Mountain area that would show them. They could also do something called reverse geofence. They're able to put like a little fence around the area, and they could look and see what other people were in that same area at that same time. So that's a way to also uncover potentially other suspects if they're involved or not. They may have done that and concluded there was nobody else around at that time in the morning, or maybe there's one or two people and they've interviewed them. But certainly in today's day and age, digital evidence is everything.
Are there any legal precedents where a murder-suicide ruling was later overturned due to any new evidence?
Sure. I just mentioned the Gene Hackman thing. It sounds like that was pretty much, it can't sound like I think initially the reports were, it sounds like a murder-suicide, ended up not being that at all.
Right. And so, I guess at this point, again, this was the preliminary investigation. I guess all we can do is wait. What role does ballistic evidence play in determining who fired the weapon?
Well, it's a gunshot case, so obviously it plays the major role. So they'll look at the angle of the entry points of the bullets, what type of projectile was found, casings or any bullet casings around the bodies, see where they were ejected. That obviously makes a difference depending on the kind of firearm. If, different guns eject projectiles different ways. Some go backwards to the side, some go forward, so that it all plays into the case. But of course, at the end of the day, this is just trying to narrow down what happened. No one can say for sure.
And moving on to the gunshot residue, how crucial is gunshot residue testing, and what can it tell investigators?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty important. If they found gunshot residue on one kid and not on the other, I think that then would be a sign to us that it looks like a murder-suicide, right?
Absolutely. What are some of the most common misinterpretations law enforcement makes in murder suicide cases? Can you break that down for us?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's hard to say with the most basic what mistakes they make. I just think a rush to judgment or a rush to a conclusion is really usually the biggest mistake I see in any case. Is they're trying to come up with an answer and they come up with one too soon just to appease either the family, the public, or obviously it's not appeasing the family, but just to come up with an answer because of the magnitude of the case.
If new evidence emerges later, which, we've said that definitely can happen. We saw that with Gene Hackman. We see that in other cases as well. What is the process for law enforcement to reconsider a ruling?
I mean, there's really no process. They just have new evidence. They go back through it and they come up with a decision that's based on evidence that they give more weight and come up with that conclusion.
And you're familiar with Bell Mountain. Does anything
Yeah.
about this location make it a plausible or unlikely place for this to have happened?
Well, as I was alluding to before, it's when I've been there, it's usually pretty crowded. Again, it's a very scenic area, and it's people go vacation there. It's quiet. It's not. I'd say it's not easy to get all the way to the top. I mean, it's a paved road, but it curves around. I mean, it goes all the way up pretty high. It's pretty steep actually. But there are houses. It's a residential area. You have to go through a residential area to get up there. It's only one way in, one way out. So if there were a gunshot fired a gunshot, you'd think somebody or someone would have heard something and seen something going on. There's definitely a bunch of homes you have to pass by on the way up there and the way out.
Yeah, and do you mind, just kind of painting a picture for us for those that haven't been or don't know what it looks like? We've heard just from police and from reports that have been released that the twins were found at the very top of the mountain. How hard is it to get up there? How long does it take? Explain it to us.
So to get to the top, it's probably there's two parts. There's the top, which is flat with the parking lot. So it's about a 10-minute drive, winding road. Then once you get to the parking lot part, there's another part that goes up to the top, which is pretty steep. So not every car I'd recommend, or even the faint of heart, would want to go up to the top. When I go, I have my Jeep, so there's a lot of Jeeps up there actually. You go 4-wheel drive up to the top because really, I mean, it's pretty steep, and I would say about your elevation is probably about 2,800 feet up, which is pretty high for Georgia, and everything around is flat. So you could see for miles, and you can look down and you see the huge lake the lake in Hiawassee, Lake Chattooga. You can see over North Carolina. It's gorgeous, idyllic place. So for this to happen there is pretty awful. So, but again, and I guess the question is, how do these kids even know where Bell Mountain was? How do they know to go to the top? Why would they go to the top to do this? Those are questions that I have. Why pick that spot for a murder suicide? Seems kind of strange to me.
Right.
and
And
why.
according to the family, the family has told, media outlets that they've never even been there before. Or they don't, them as a family they've never been. So they believe the twins have never been on their own as well. I know you said a lot of people usually frequent that area. Is there cell service? Is there reception? Are there cameras around? Can you explain that?
I mean, yeah, there's cell service. You're asking me if there's cameras. I've never really thought about it until now. Yeah, maybe. Again, it's not a major metropolitan area, so highly unlikely. You know, as we're talking about this, I would assume investigators have gone into the kids' phones and looked at their Google searches. Maybe they Googled Bell Mountain. If they Googled Bell Mountain, then obviously that's important because that shows they were looking for Bell Mountain, as opposed to them getting in trouble with somebody, maybe somebody forced them at gunpoint and they go all the way to Hiawassee or something. Who knows? But I would assume that their Google searches or whatever they use for a search engine would help, illuminate what they were trying to do or where they were going. And historically, had they ever been there before, they could potentially see that in their phone as well.
From a legal perspective, how does a remote location impact an investigation?
I mean, I think it make it easier actually, right? I mean, there's nobody really around, and there's not a ton of people going in and out. Like I said, it's crowded. I mean, different times of the year, obviously, right? And it's not crowded in the sense of like New York City crowded. It's not a big area, so it's just crowded for that part of town. But if it's remote, I mean, you think it's not remote like Alaska. So I mean, it's just a place top of a mountain in Georgia. But you think it'd make it easier because there'd be less crowds, less people to worry about. That there maybe less eyewitnesses, but I don't think it creates problems. It's not hard to get to. If that's what you're asking. It's not. You have to go looking around and climb up and down the side of the mountain. It's not like that. There's a parking lot. There's a top. There's a staircase. There's actually a lot of graffiti on it. People go to the top and they like paint all the rocks with their names on it and all that. So.
Well, this is definitely an ongoing investigation, and we will be following it closely. Lawrence, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We are still waiting on the autopsies to be released. According to the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, the medical examiner has completed the autopsies, but the official ruling and results are pending additional forensic tests. For Law and Crime, I'm Kennedi Walker.